What's going on, everyone? So I just saw Spider-Man No Way Home. There's no words. Actually, we have a lot of them. So me and my friend Nick, who's a fellow lover of films, decided to start a podcast together. We're calling it Cinema 914. I'm going to put a link down in the description below. We only have a couple episodes up just yet because we're just getting started. The most recent episode is Spider-Man No Way Home. In addition to posting it on the Cinema 914 channel, I'm also going to post it on this channel so you guys can see it. But definitely go check out our podcast. We go into way greater depth than I usually do on my films because it's more of a podcast format, so we have a lot more time to just talk, and it's more of a conversation as opposed to like a just typical movie review. So I hope you guys saw the film, and this is a major spoiler warning because me and Nick go into a lot of spoilers. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoy. Let's talk about Spider-Man No Way Home.
Welcome back to Cinema 914. We just got back from seeing Spider-Man No Way Home.
Yeah, it was a good time.
And let me tell you, wow, what a film.
Yeah, what a film. So we're going to have to drop a major spoiler warning right now. With that being said, everyone knew what was going to come. We knew that, in the trailer you see Doc Ock from Spider-Man 2. We knew the multiverse was going to be involved. We knew that Bully was coming back. We didn't know. The trailers didn't show. There's shots in the movie that were in the trailer, but Bully and Garfield are not there. And they're both here. And boy, are they here.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
That was a great reaction from the theater.
Yeah, the only two, and I told Nick going in, I was like, yo, there's going to be some major cheering and clapping going on, so we might miss some shit. There was only like two major chants and cheers and claps and major applause, and it was when Bully himself, a.k.a. America's Sweetheart, a.k.a. Tobey Maguire, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man himself, and when Andrew Garfield...
Yeah, he was the first one. He was the first one to show up out of the two, and he got quite a big reaction. And then obviously when the Tobster came on screen, everyone kind of just lost it.
Let's talk about the inclusion of these two nostalgic characters that we love, the two Spider-Men, because it's weird to see Andrew Garfield, his dark Spider-Man suit and his charm, with Tobey Maguire's sweet, Raimi Spider-Man suit, and then Tom Holland in this MCU-ified. It's weird to see them all converge and be in the same movie.
Right.
It's weird to see Tobey swinging in an MCU movie.
Absolutely. But with the reason why I feel like it's so weird is because, I said this in our first episode, each of these Spider-Man each of these actors brought something different to the Spider-Man character.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of weird seeing each of those personas clash into one film, but I also think that's what's the beauty of it too, is you see all these different sides of Spider-Man from different universes.
It reminded me a lot of Into the Spider-Verse, that really good animated 2018 movie that won an Oscar, I'm pretty sure, for
it did.
Best Animated. Yeah, that with all this, in other words, all the Spider-Men or Spider people that came into that movie with Miles Morales, and that really made me a big Miles Morales fan too.
Right.
That movie is
which I think that he honestly, that is my opinion. And I think he's gonna be implemented in the next trilogy.
Childish Gambino was in his Homecoming.
He was in Homecoming, so
and he said he has a nephew, so that means that he's out there. Maybe he's not going to be interested. And you said the Young Avengers are coming, but again, seeing Tobey Maguire in his mid-40s, obviously he's not as bulky as in shape as he was. He's a little bit skinnier, scrawnier, but he's not like, he's still believable as Spider-Man. Same
Absolutely.
thing with
It was so exciting to see him back on.
You know what I love?
Costume.
They both had cute moments. Peter had the moment where he's like, yeah, I had this alien goo that I had to fight, or he was like, yeah, the web comes out of my wrist, doesn't come out of your wrist, and then they're talking about the Avengers, like, what's the Avengers? And he's like, yeah, I fought an alien, and Andrew Garfield's like desperately like, he's instantly in love with these two Spider people,
right.
amicably, like
I love you guys.
I never had brothers, like and Tobey Maguire, he's very just kind of withdrawn, stoic, because I feel like if they just shoved him in your face too much, it would be like kind of
they wanted him to keep that charm with him.
Do you think they had a good amount of screen time?
I think they had just the right amount of screen time, because obviously this is Tom Holland's story, and honestly this is the story of him becoming Spider-Man, because Spider-Man. In the first two films he obviously had some hardships, but in this film he goes through some things that really make him realize what being Spider-Man is and what kind of responsibilities you have, and how ultimately not everything is going to go your way. There's going to be times where you are down on your knees.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened to Garfield and Tobey. So to see those stories,
they already had that.
They have that great scene when they're after, and again, spoiler alert, but Aunt May dies from the Green Goblin. They have that great scene that you were talking about on the roof where he's, him, MJ, and Ned are kind of consoling each other because they're all crying because. Yeah,
that's like the scene that got me out of the whole movie was after May died, and they're trying to find Tom Holland's Peter, and they can't find him, and so that's when Ned decides to try and find him, and he ends up bringing in the other two Spider-Men, and honestly having them come with MJ and Ned to go get Peter. It was great for that because now Tom Holland's Peter has other people like him that have gone through the things that he's gone through that do understand him.
He makes the selfless act in the end. That's his arc. That's when we say he became a Spider-Man. It's really because Dr. Strange points out that he's just a kid.
Mm-hmm. At the very beginning of the film.
Very beginning, and he says it again, I think, in the middle at some point, not a little more subtly that time, but. Yeah. And then in the end, he makes the set. Just when him and MJ were like really, really on good terms in that honeymoon phase, kind of their relationship, and his friendship with Ned had never been stronger than it was in this movie. The guy in the chair bit is still coming through.
Right.
So he gives all that up, and same thing with Happy. His last real link to Tony Stark, who I'm sure is really like his Uncle Ben in this universe. So to see him be fully alone and make that decision, and he's Spider-Man, and then he incorporates a part of Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man and Tobey's Spider-Man and his Spider-Man. He made a new suit. He flies out into the snow and he swings.
I want to talk about that new suit because after everybody's memories kind of wiped of Peter being Spider-Man. He doesn't have the Stark Industries behind him anymore, so he doesn't have the technology to keep his suits updated. He doesn't really
feel like an Avenger in this movie. He feels like this is just a Spider-Man story.
Yeah, this is like his upcoming story to be being a true Spider-Man.
Yeah.
But going back on that suit, towards the very end of the film, when he's swinging through in his new suit, and you see in his new apartment like a tailor machine. Yeah. And so he was making his new suit, and what I really liked, and if you really had to pay attention to it, but he incorporated pieces from Tobey's suit and Garfield's suit into his new suit. Like you see the dark shiny blue from Andrew, and then you see the original red with the webbing.
The webbing of the
suit from Tobey.
Yeah.
It was really cool to see that.
Yeah, because before that he was kind of rocking that Spider-Man PS4 looking, the white spider suit.
Yeah.
It was kind of like still had and he starts out with the Iron Spider suit. So like to see him in a real Spider-Man suit that he made, that Peter Parker made after encountering other Peter Parkers to show, and and I love the suit. I love how it ended on that too. What I will say is, we expected Bully to have a beard. And when we say Bully, we're talking about Tobey Maguire. If you haven't checked out any of the Bully Maguire videos on YouTube, you should, because you're doing yourself a disservice if you're not.
Bully Maguire.
Those things are ridiculous. They're outrageously funny, and they get better every time. That's out of respect, because we love Tobey. And he was great in the film. Now, the only thing I disliked about the Spider-Man was that when they were like encountering their villains, it felt very hollow. When Tobey sees Flint Marko again, he just kind of. It just doesn't feel like anything's there. It was a little bit with Ock, because he was like, oh, hell, because that's when Ock had gone from... He finally had the inhibitor chip restored, so now he was his real self. It wasn't controlled by the arms towards the end. He has his little moment with Peter, and he's like, oh, Dr. Tavius, good to see you. And he's like, oh, it's good to see you, dear boy. Like, that was nice. But I feel like their encounters with their villains, even when Garfield was with Max, it brought me right back, because the dialogue they had was very reminiscent of their films, but it's just like it just felt a little hollow to me.
I felt like those encounters were also kind of rushed a little bit. Like
maybe that's why they felt so hollow, because they were rushed.
It was definitely rushed, because I felt like a lot of the time when they were encountering those villains, it was more along the lines of just like picking up where they left off.
Yeah, feeling like it was just yesterday that Tobey was with MJ and they had that tender moment at the very end of Spider-Man 3.
Right.
Like coming right off of that, he's like, oh, we worked at our relationship and we're there now. So it's like maybe they're married. He didn't say it, but
right. I mean, you kind of have to assume at this point, because we don't know. I kind of want to go back to the beginning of the film, and when we're first incorporated with all the villains after that blip of the first spell, with Doctor
So
Strange.
what he tries to do essentially at the onset of this film is he tries to, as everyone knows, he's Spider-Man from Mysterio and Far From Home. So he goes to Doctor Strange and he's like, look, I don't want people to know I'm Spider-Man. Can you do it? And Doctor Strange reluctantly agrees, but then Peter kind of goes back and forth. Should I do it? Should I not do it? I want Aunt May to know. I want MJ to know, and kind of botches it in the process. And Doctor Strange is like, all right, I'll contain it, and we'll go back to this later.
Within that time, when the spell blips, before he contains it,
some multiverse characters like the Lizard and Doc Ock from all their respective movies, they come back, and
they were able to sneak through.
Green Goblin, who turns out to be the real main antagonist of the threat. He's the one that kills Aunt May. He's the last. He's pounding on him at the end of the movie, Peter. Which
was an insane scene.
Yeah, I love that scene because he, again, like I said in the car, it was very reminiscent of when Peter was when Tobey Maguire was beating on Goblin in his first Spider-Man. Like he's like pounding him in. He's about to like end him, and then he pleads with him to stop. That's what Peter was doing. He was enraged, just like Toby said. I had this rage, and
when Tom Holland's Peter at the end of that film, like he had that rage built within him. Like it was
that manhood. Now that you've gone through something this,
he wanted revenge.
Yeah, he wanted revenge. And I loved how Toby and Andrew Garfield had their funny bits and charming moments throughout. But their two big moments, I think, was when Andrew Garfield saved MJ from falling off.
Oh, that was one of my favorite. That was one of my favorite scenes.
And did you see him when he saves her? He's in tears himself because he's like, I didn't let this person die like I did, even though I tried. So that was great to see his redemption. I agree with you. Great moment. And then when Tom Holland was about to impale Norman with his glider.
Yeah, history was about to repeat itself.
And just like when Toby was in his third movie and he's about to get stabbed with Goblin's glider, Harry's glider, Harry goes in front of it and sacrifices himself. And Peter stops him from doing that because he knows that Spider-Man, they don't kill. And in other words, killing is not the answer. You know what I mean? It never is, especially as a superhero like Spider-Man, who's the everyman's hero. He's ones the kids are supposed to relate to. Like he can't be a killer like a Punisher type character.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, he's not a vigilante.
When Toby stopped it and then he got stabbed by Norman, even though he didn't die, like that, he didn't have to say anything. It was just they just looked at each other. I don't even know if Holland was looking at Toby, but
he was. Was
he? Toby just looked at him and didn't say anything.
Because he didn't need to because he already mentioned that rage when they were on top of the school.
He just looked at him with that look, like that Uncle Ben look, like this is not what you're supposed to be doing.
Right. So when we go back to let's go back to the villains here. When we're first introduced to Otto, when Otto came back, that kind of got a rise out of the audience too.
Yeah, that was
just to see Alfred Molina come back. That was a pretty cool scene.
And that's the thing. We knew that was coming.
Yeah.
But it was still great to see it come to fruition.
Yeah.
How did you feel about him? Like starting out, the inhibitor chip had broken, and he was Doc Ock. He wasn't Otto Octavius.
Right. It was kind of cool to see when they were brought into Tom Holland's verse. It was cool to see like how they were all brought in at the same time of each conflict in all the Spider Verses, where you're looking at like Otto's is right when he's building up the power of the sun, and then obviously when it comes to Goblin, that's at the height of their conflict in the first film. When you see Max come back, that was at the height of
right before he died.
Garfield's. This was all right before they died.
Yeah, because me and Nick were thinking, like, before we saw the film, are they going to be the guys we saw at the ends of their films? Like with Otto, was he going to be the good guy or the bad guy? We didn't know. And it turns out that they all kind of came back as bad. Even when Norman came back and they were trying to make him be the only good one when he came back, I was like, this is no fucking way.
It was too good to be true.
There's no way he was going to be that benevolent. So
no, absolutely, and you kind of see that when Osborn is in that alleyway and he has his goblin mask off.
Probably right back to the first.
So when he's in his apartment in front of the mirror, and that dark side of Osborn,
Goblin and Norman are like
they're having that clash, and they have that argument again in the alleyway where he's like, you can never get rid of me no matter what you do. And so when he destroys his mask, that didn't cause anything.
Didn't he say something like, this is a new world to take over or something?
Yeah, he was like, look at the opportunities we have now.
Yeah, exactly. So and same thing with Max. He's like, oh, I'm stronger in this universe, right? Or he has like,
there was more power in this universe.
He had he wasn't blue anymore. Like, he said something about not being blue. Even his fucking teeth, dude.
Yeah.
His teeth were, like, the gap in his two teeth, because everyone made fun of that when it came out. And when you saw it, it was just like, why, like, did that fix the gap in his teeth? Why the fuck did the electricity do that? And I feel like that's just one of those fan service things that they just noticed. And they're like, all right, fine, here you fuckers, we'll give it to you. You know what I mean?
Right. The thing that I liked about this film was that it wasn't just battles to stop the villains, it was a battle to fix them.
Yeah, Peter, I mean, because Doctor Strange was like, they need to go back and accept their fate. And to the Homecoming or No Way Home Peter, or pre-Endgame Peter, I guess, he might have been like, fine, yeah, let him go. That's responsibility I don't want, or I don't need, because I have MJ and I have a kind of a perfect life right now. But their lives were getting fucked because they couldn't get into college.
It was interesting to see that kind of change in Peter.
Yeah, to be like, I want to help. Instead of send them back, like, no, let's help them. Like, that's what an Avenger would do. That's what a hero would do.
And so that's what ultimately made Peter take the containing box with the spell from Strange and cause the whole clash with Strange.
Yeah.
And when Spider-Man wins that battle with Strange, he takes all of the villains out of their cages and he wants to immediately take them to Happy's where he has the Stark equipment to modify each person's superhuman abilities and make every villain better. He wants them to lose that aspect of them.
Try to give them that second chance.
Yeah,
that's what Aunt May tells them.
Yeah.
Right before she gives him she finally drops the with great power comes great responsibility line.
Yeah, because that's when Tom Holland's Spider-Man was like, did I make a mistake? Like, this is all my fault. And she was like, no, you did the right thing. You know, and she was like, listen, you know, with great power, there's going to be great responsibilities along with that power. And that's ultimately when she dies. And I feel like that's what happens with every beloved one that gives a Spider-Man that speech. They die seconds later.
Yeah.
You know,
it's poetic almost.
Yeah, and that's where the change in each Spider-Man happens.
Yeah, that's when a Spider-Man is born.
Yeah.
Because that's usually when the revenge part comes.
Exactly.
I missed the part where that's my problem.
Oh, Bully.
Like, Bully killed it. And on that, real quick, they dropped some of the same lines from the first movie. When Norman says, he was like, you know, I'm something of a scientist myself. I fucking lost it. I was like, this is awesome. Anyway, a Spider-Man is born because then the revenge quest comes. And then they realize that, and Bully says, revenge isn't the answer. It didn't make me feel better. I thought I killed the man who did it. It just made me angrier. And it took me a long time to get over that.
Even with Garfield's, when Garfield's explaining his story when he lost Gwen, he said he was filled with rage too, and all it did
He'll never forgive himself.
Yeah, he said he would never forgive himself for it, and it's made him pull his punches. And you know, that was just that to me. That to me,
beautiful sentiment.
Yeah, that to me was the best
punch
scene.
Less harder, a little less aggressive. Like, that's so perfect. That's so Spider-Man. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. That's why that was my favorite scene in the entire film.
And you know what? Maybe that's why, because I haven't really been the biggest fan of this. I like the Spider-Man. I like the home movies, Homecoming and No Way Home. But I've never been a huge fan of it until now, I think, because it's probably because he wasn't really Spider-Man in other movies. He was, but he hadn't gotten to that Uncle Ben moment, full of rage and realizing that the come down off that and realizing the greater good and just beauty and the burdens of responsibility. And
the reason why he didn't have that experience was because when Tony Stark died, it wasn't at the hands of like a villain. It was a sacrifice more than anything.
Yeah, it wasn't something that he could have changed if he wanted to.
Yeah, it's not something that was, you know, in his control.
Yeah. This time it was indirectly because of him. If he hadn't done what he did, it wouldn't have happened.
And that's what Osborn wanted him to believe.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
And that's why, you know, the deception of him was great, I thought. But, you know, on the subject of Tony Stark, real quick, another reason why I like this movie so much is because you knew you were watching an MCU movie, but there was no mention of Captain America or Tony Stark.
Right.
Not much, at least.
No.
It felt like more of a Spider-Man-centered story. He wasn't getting saved constantly by Iron Man. He wasn't getting help from anything from the Avengers. You know, it was just him. And it was a lot more emotional, and it was just a better film than his predecessors. And listen, Peter's made mistakes in the past. In Far From Home, he gave Mysterio the glasses, and that was a bad decision because look what that turned out to do. And what did he do in Homecoming?
In Homecoming, it was the
ferry.
The ferry.
He made mistakes, big mistakes in the past, but this one this one hurt him. This one was personal. This one caused Aunt May to die, and so that Uncle Ben moment of just look what your actions did. Even Dr. Strange says, you want me to mess with time because your life is a little messy right now? I'm sure with time, he could have found a way. A stronger Peter would have been able to do that. But because Peter's not the Spider-Man yet,
he didn't have that.
He didn't have the mental
experience.
fortitude to know this is a selfish act in a way.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's why seeing his selfless act in the finale was so earned and so perfect and so poetic. It was a great way to end the story.
Mm-hmm.
I was worried that would this film like ruin my childhood? Would this film mess up the characters that I've loved and loathed over the years? And I don't think it did. I mean, I do think Doc Ock, like his humor was just so MCU humor. Like I don't remember him having that much.
Because he did
humor.
it. He did it.
He was
in
a
the
lot
remake.
more like. I mean, he was way more charming in his film. Even when he was a villain, he wasn't like cartoonishly evil and like saying really cliche things. You know, he had a lot of like humor, like MCU humor in his dialogue. You know what I mean? Like, and it sometimes it just didn't work for me. But all in all, I think when he saved the Spider-Man in the end, and it was just. That's just so good because that's just true to what we know. Doc Ock kind of saved the day, just like he did in his first film. So it didn't really ruin it for me. I would say it just, how do I describe it? It's like a new experience. It's like a what if situation almost. Like what if you saw these Spider-Men again? Mm-hmm. Like what would they do in this universe? How would they affect the Marvel universe should they be placed in it? I think they pulled it off.
I don't
think it was perfect. And no film really is perfect, but I don't think this film was like without its flaws. I don't think it had many flaws, mind you.
It definitely it did what it set out to do.
You're exactly right. Doing what it wanted to do and what it set out to do, it absolutely succeeded. Killing Aunt May, birthing the Spider-Man, and it gave me a good theater experience. I think Endgame was probably the craziest theater experience I'll ever have, but this was a good one. I felt what the movie wanted me to feel. There were some genuinely funny moments in it that, you know, like when Ned's doing the fucking... When he's doing Doctor Strange shit, I'm like, yo, this is just good.
Which is what I'm gonna...
The writing was better.
I want to go into that right now, because another thing that I really liked about the film was... you know, even with the side characters, you see them involved a little bit more. You know, especially with Ned and with MJ, but especially with Ned. You know, you see him kind of take on a bigger role, a more important role, especially when he steals the ring from Doctor Strange. Well, he didn't really steal it; he kind of just picked it up, and you see him kind of adapt it and actually have, you know, sorcerer powers within him, which was kind of cool because like he even mentioned
to do that.
Well, when he first got to Strange's place, you know, the Sanctum, he was trying to talk to Strange and said, you know, sometimes I get these tinglings in my hands and I feel like I have something within me too. And then when he takes the ring from Strange and he starts messing around, he's able to actually make portals and things like that, which were pretty cool. Which ultimately led me to have a theory about him, because, you know, at first, you know, before we watched the film, my theory was that he falls along with MJ when they're on the scaffolding or when they're on Statue of Liberty. They both fall. Spider-Man has to make a choice, and my theory was that he would choose MJ, and Ned would be left falling, and that's when Goblin would take him and save him and be like, look where your friends left you, and kind of turn him to be Hobgoblin.
That manipulative
that
he had
exactly that Defoe has as
that would have
Goblin.
Been a crazy,
which is what I figured would happen, but I was wrong. But what happened here in this movie was actually leading me to believe something else. So when he has this ring and he's messing around and he's able to, you know, start making portals and things, it made me think about it. And my theory is, because, you know, at the beginning of the film you see Wong comes back for a few scenes, and we don't know too much about Ned's family lineage and family history.
I think it was his grandma that they were staying in her house.
They were staying in her house with. And so what I think is I think that Ned is somehow related to Wong, because he has certain sorcerer abilities, and you know, when Strange comes back from the other realm, he goes, you made this portal, and he goes, yeah,
no problem. Like, it took Doctor Strange like months to do that.
And he did it. He did it in one
without
movie.
any train. And that's when you said that, I was like, at first I was like, what? But then I was like, wait, you're right. How did he have no trouble doing it? Like, on his damn near first try, he basically opened a portal.
Right. And like I said, we don't know too much about Ned's history, family history anyway. And like, what was really funny to see is his grandma, I think, is in that scene. She wasn't questioning the other Spider-Man coming into the realm. She wasn't questioning, the portals that were still there. She was like, can you get these cobwebs out of the corners and can you clean up, please?
I think it was made for laughs in part, but yeah, I thought that was a very cute scene.
It kind of just makes you scratch your head a little bit, like, could Ned, be a future sorcerer?
I don't know.
Could he be involved in that world?
And that would be cool to explore. I would love to see something I would love to see some development within that if that happens to be true. Because I think that's a great theory. I think Ned and MJ, like in the past, they've been kind of like just there, but I feel like they were a lot more important in this film. Like,
absolutely.
I actually really like their characters in this film. I didn't really care for them too much in the previous ones, but this time I was like, damn, I really believe her and Peter's relationship. They really care about each other. Tom Holland was crying for a lot of scenes in this movie. He had to pull off some really heart-wrenching scenes.
Yeah, she was like, no matter what, I'm here. We're through and through. I'm here
exactly. That's love, man. And then even with Ned, when they have their moments of just their blossoming friendship.
Right. When
Peter loses May, and those are just three friends, like, grieving for their friend.
Yeah.
And I can relate to that.
Yeah.
So that was a good scene, and having Garfield and Toby come down in that scene to be like, you're not alone. With great power comes great responsibility. I thought they were going to have a lot more dialogue in that scene, but there wasn't that much dialogue.
Right.
It was mostly just short lines about, I've been here. We're the only ones who are going to know what this is like.
We know what it's like to be in your shoes.
To go through what you're going through, we understand. And that's what gets him on board. That's what kind of rejuvenates his spirit
and makes him develop a plan to stop.
And he develops that plan and he executes it. It's Peter Parker becoming Spider-Man.
Yeah,
he's having at least three more pictures.
Yeah, so right before the drop of No Way Home, Feige confirmed that his plan is to have another trilogy involving Holland. Wow. And Holland even said in an interview, he said, I mean, that would be awesome if we can get that to happen. He said, obviously, if he gets that to happen, I'm on board.
I think fans like it enough.
And what's really interesting, what was really interesting, and which makes me excited to think that there will be another trilogy, especially with Holland, is there's so many villains being introduced in these end credit scenes and getting their own movies. Like, I definitely see Vulture making a return due to, end credit scenes, Morbius coming in.
Like Vulture being in the Morbius trailer. Morbius is not an MCU movie. It's a Sony Spider-Man movie in the Venom universe. Mm-hmm. And to see Michael Keaton's Vulture show up in that, Morbius is coming to the MCU.
Absolutely. And Venom is making a return because he was even in Venom 2's end credit scenes, that's when we first see him being connected to Tom Holland's Spider-Man. And then
what was that end credit scene in Carnage?
So basically in Carnage and Let There Be Carnage, they're basically they're taking a break from the city and they go to like a resort and
where he is here.
Yeah, so he's kind of just like lounging in a resort, like a Mediterranean resort.
Yeah.
And they're kind of just chilling in a hotel room, and that's when the blip happens, and it transports him to a different room. But it's like the same. It's like a different universe, but the same room. And on the TV, it shows when It shows J. Jonah Jameson talking about Tom Holland being Spider-Man.
Gotcha.
And so that was kind of how that started. And then in this movie, the end credits, it shows Eddie Brock again, asking more questions about that universe.
And it's like, I should go to New York and meet this guy.
Yeah, so he was in that universe because he was in the original Venom universe. There is no Avengers, there is no Spider-Man, and so when they blip him in that short period of time when he's at the bar, he's asking the bartender all sorts of questions about the Avengers, about Spider-Man, about Thanos. Right before he gets blipped back, like you kind of see like bits of the symbiote stay in that universe. So it's exciting to see if maybe Eddie Brock is in that universe as well, and that symbiote finds Eddie Brock in that universe.
Because that's what happens in the end credit scene here, or the post credit scene. When everything gets restored, Venom goes back to his universe, but a little bit of Venom, the symbiote, stays behind. Mm-hmm. So he's in the MCU now.
Yeah, that kind of proves that proves that he is going to be in the MCU.
Now it might not be Tom Hardy though.
It might not, but I would love to see that. I absolutely would.
Yeah, me too. Now, let's talk about the end credit scene a little bit too, because the end credit scene, it was strange because, pun intended, because it was almost like a trailer. It was shot like a trailer.
Yeah, because
it was basically a preview. Essentially, it was a preview for the Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness movie, which is coming soon.
Which was great that they did that, because this film was the introduction to the multiverse.
Yeah, exactly. Like, the multiverse exists. Now we got a first glimpse of it. Well, we got our first glimpse of, like, time and, like, the bending of it, or just the warping of reality with Infinity War and Endgame, but also with WandaVision, and with Loki, the whole time TVA, and Kang, and all that crazy shit that happened. But we've kind of been introduced to the idea of, like, different realities, or you know what I mean? And this movie is the first time, No Way Home is the first time we saw it come to fruition.
Right.
And like, yeah, the multiverse, like, at its here, we're showing it to you, full and through. Like, it's here.
Right.
Different, all the Spider-Man that you've seen before, they're here. That's what the multiverse can be. That's what the multiverse is.
Right.
So, it was just really great to see that come together.
Absolutely. I mean, like, this film was just... It incorporated so much in such a short amount of time. Because honestly, I don't think it was an insanely long film. I think it was, what, two and a half hours?
Maybe it was definitely more than 2 hours, but I don't know how much. It wasn't, but it didn't feel that long.
It moved quick.
There really weren't any wasted moments this time.
No.
There was the MCU moments, the MCU humor was there. There was a lot of MCU in this movie, obviously.
Right.
But, like I said before, this feels like a good Spider-Man movie. Me and Nick were talking on the way home, and I said, out of all the Spider-Man stories in, the mainstream media right now, I think Spider-Man PS4, that story, I think Spider-Man 2, and maybe Into the Spideyverse, those 3 Spider-Man properties are probably my favorite Spider-Man stories. This is up there with them, I think. It's earned that title for me, because it felt, out of all the home movies, it felt the most like a real Spider-Man movie. And not just because Bully and Garfield were there, it just felt like a Spider-Man movie.
Right. It was just kind of cool to see them incorporate all these things, like the multiverse and pulling that from Into the Spider-Verse.
Yeah, exactly.
And things like that. It's kind of cool to see them knit and pick from previous Spider-Man films and incorporate it into this MCU film.
Yeah.
I actually really enjoyed that a lot. For me, I would say this is definitely in my top 3 Spider-Man movies and top 5 Marvel movies.
Yeah.
To me, just because it was
100%.
just it was a true story. It was just through and through a complete film.
Yeah, exactly.
And there was no holes, there was no stones left unturned.
Yeah.
Besides the ones that they want to leave unturned to continue on the films. But to me, I would say I would put this in my top 3.
And I'd agree, 100%. And as grand as it felt, because of the whole multiverse shit that's in there, as epic as it kind of feels, it feels also very down to earth. And not, like I said this before, but it doesn't feel like it's part of this overall MCU narrative. We're just focusing on Spider-Man here. We're not hearing about other villains. There's not our other heroes. It felt like a genuine Spider-Man movie. There wasn't really anyone here that didn't need to be here, Right,
because like in the beginning of the film, when the FBI comes to question Peter, and he initially states and eventually, like, he needs him, he said, I need a lawyer. And so, like, when he sits down for like a briefing with a lawyer, it's Matt Murdock comes into the scene, and that was that got an excitement out of the crowd, just because, like, Matt Murdock wasn't initially set in the MCU. He comes from a Netflix original series, and, like, Charlie Cox just did such an amazing job. Which is why I'm so happy they recast him and brought him into the MCU, because
it just goes to show you how much power the MCU, like, Marvel has right now. Like, where they're just bringing all these properties together.
Yeah,
like,
I would definitely
they're very ambitious right now. Yeah, and I'm here for it.
I would definitely be excited to see a Daredevil, cameo in the next Spider-Man film.
It was a good cameo.
Like a collab would be really sick.
It got a cheer, bro. That was
it got an excitement. Yeah, it got an excitement out of it.
It would be good to see him. And didn't you say that Tom Holland wants Kingpin to be?
I think so. I think that would be pretty cool. But if they're gonna do that, I would love them to bring the same guy that they had in the Daredevil series, because that guy did an amazing job.
What other characters do you think what other characters do you want to see in the MCU now? Like, you were saying you wanted to see Kraven.
Yeah, so my thing is I would there's some characters that when I was a kid and I was watching the cartoon, the Spider-Man cartoons. there are certain characters that I would be like, I would love to see this in a live action. So, you know, like now that we know that we're supposedly getting 3 more movies, I would absolutely love to see, because we know the ones that are returning. We know Vulture is returning, we know Venom is coming in, and we know Morbius is going to eventually find his way in. But there's some that I would just absolutely love to see as a live action, and one of them is Kraven the Hunter. Another one is Chameleon.
Yeah, me too.
They were talking about bringing Scorpion in, so I would love to see Scorpion again.
Right?
He was there in at the end of Homecoming. Yeah. I would love to see Scorpion come back.
Me too.
I would love to see them revive where they failed in Raimi's third. I would love to see them implement the Wolfman, which is J. Jonah Jameson's son. They planned on doing that if Raimi was able to continue his films, but I would love to see if they bring that back.
Cool. What about Morbius? Would you like to see him face off with Morbius?
Yeah, that's why I'm excited that the Morbius film is coming out, and I definitely want to do a future episode on that when it does come out, just because it looks amazing, you know. And I like the casting in that film. It's like the proper casting for that dark character. I think Jared Leto plays a dark character very, very well. So I'm excited to see his entrance into the MCU. Another one that I would like to see is the implementation of like Shocker.
Yeah. Now Shocker, the shock technology was in Homecoming. It was kind of passed to different members of Vulture's crew. So there wasn't like a definitive Shocker yet. Like there wasn't a Herman Schultz Shocker yet. But I would love to see Shocker. I'd love to see Kingpin. I'd like to see a good rendition of Rhino, and I'd like to see Venom and Spider-Man kind of clash. Like I think which
is exciting that it looks like they're headed that way. You know,
who do you think's gonna get the Venom? Because if they're in like the Mediterranean right now, do you think that symbiote's just gonna like hang around for months or whatever, or do you think it's gonna like hitch a ride back to the States or something? I
mean, that's the ultimate question. I mean, obviously Venom has to find his way to Eddie Brock, just because that's the guy who's always associated with Venom.
So do you think there's an Eddie Brock of this universe? I mean, we saw the Tom Hardy Eddie Brock.
I think that they're going to pull him back in, and I think that Tom Hardy is going to find his way into the MCU.
He's an alien, like maybe something with like travel, like I don't know, maybe like that'll. I'm not sure, but I feel like I think.
Well, in the post-credit scene of Let There Be Carnage, Venom is talking to Tom Hardy. You know, he's talking to Eddie Brock, and he said, you know, there's so many things that we can do that would just blow your mind. Like, you don't have the mental capability to understand the things that we could do. Yeah. So there is an endless possibility of him, you know, being revived in the MCU.
I agree.
You know, it would be interesting to see, and I know that there's some comics out there that introduce Blade as well.
Because they're doing Blade.
They're making Blade with Mahershala Ali.
Yeah, and he's a damn fine actor, Mahershala Ali.
So it'd be interesting to see if maybe at some point in the future they
I could see that.
They incorporate him.
I could see that. Blade. See, the thing is, Blade is like Morbius. He's brutal. He's bloody. He's R-rated. You know what I mean? So I think to see Blade and Morbius together would be cool. But again, like you say, this new Avengers.
That would be a very interesting incorporation. Would be Morbius and Blade.
Right?
I think that'd be pretty sick.
Yeah. I agree.
But jumping back onto the film here, is there any specific things that like any specific scenes that you think would say being like your top 5 scenes?
I would say the scene when they're consoling him on top of the school, all the Spider-Men. Mm-hmm. I would say the final scene where he makes the selfless choice. Mm-hmm. And becomes that Spider-Man that we're gonna love to see in 6. Because again, having him become Spider-Man now when he's got 3 more movies, hopefully in the works. Like imagine what we're gonna get to see in 3 more movies when he's already that Spider-Man. He's that Tony Stark hero. Like who's like remember when Tony Stark has that moment in Iron Man 1 when he's like, I finally know what I'm supposed to do. I know it's right. He knows that he has to be a hero almost. Like that's what Spider-Man finally learns in this movie. And what other scenes that I really like? I love the scenes with Bully.
Yeah, Bully.
It's hard to talk about this movie and not talk about Bully and Andrew Garfield, who both did a great job. I like how they each had funny moments. You know, when they're talking about their respective universes, and they each had their like I said, Bully when he caught the glider, Garfield when he caught MJ, and of course Spider-Man with his ultimate sacrifice. They all had great moments, great Spider-Man.
Yeah, they all had great redeeming moments.
Yeah, exactly. And I was just really impressed that this movie, as far as other specific scenes, I really need to see it again. Because I as much as I do remember, there's a lot I don't remember because I just there was so
because we were just like living in the moment,
and I want to see it again. And
yeah, I'm definitely gonna watch this film again for sure, and definitely kind of nitpick it a little more. But from when I was watching, there was definitely some scenes that resonated with me and that I definitely enjoyed.
What were they?
So like honestly, for me, I liked the whole the battle scene with Doctor Strange. I think that was pretty cool to kind of see him in that different realm. I liked, like you said,
that was good CGI in that
scene. Yeah, another scene that I really liked, obviously, like to kind of piggyback off you, was there's the when they're all on top of the school, you know, all the Spider-Men are together. I like when, you know, they bring in Toby and Andrew. That was another nice scene, a nice comical scene. Another scene that I liked to me, which felt more complete. And what I told you when we were watching it, what I really wanted to see was the three of them flying in action, and kind of collaborating and working together,
which they did.
And you know, like we saw in the preview, they edited it out.
Yeah.
But when we got to see them, you know, attack the villains in slow-mo was cool. But to see them when they all did the infamous Spider-Man land with the hand out and the legs spread apart, that was just really cool to see all three of them land, you know, like in a triangle formation.
Yeah, like where our Tom Holland protagonist is front and center, and the other two Spider-Men are right by his side.
Right, which was just, that was another.
And you know what? I don't mean to cut you off, and I'm sorry. I love how willing Bully and Andrew Garfield were to help Spider-Man. Like, they didn't hesitate for a second. It wasn't like, where the fuck am I? Like what's going on? There wasn't no questioning. It was just like, you're Spider-Man. Maybe it was because of the spider sense. They just kind of felt this connection.
Well, yeah, I think I
loved how like happy they were to help, and how their presence in this movie felt justified. It doesn't like we were worried this, would they just bring these back to bring them back for pure fan service, elation, and nostalgia? No, it was.
No, they served a purpose.
They served a purpose, and that's the most important thing if you're going to bring back such iconic characters.
I think that was definitely a part of it. That's why they were willing to help, was obviously they had that sense of it. But another thing that I think, a reason why they were so willing to help, was because if this was happening in their universe, they would want that help too. They would know that they couldn't do it alone.
Yeah, 100%.
So they obviously, when they were brought into that world, they immediately were like, "Where's your Peter? Like, we know you're in trouble.
Yeah,
and we're here to help."
Yep.
So that was like another scene that I liked, that I actually enjoyed a lot. And then obviously, you know, the ending scene, you know, where, you know, Tom Holland Spider-Man and Willem Dafoe are on the shield, and Tom Holland is just ripping him apart, and you know, just completely throwing Mike Tyson haymakers on Willem Dafoe, and just completely rocking his shit.
Yeah.
But it was interesting to see that, just because, like we were talking about before, you know, we see that change in Tom Holland. You know, he's not the scared kid anymore. He's the rageful man
who's willing to make the decision.
Who's willing to take the hard sacrifice and do what he needs to do, because he wanted to kill him. Yeah, like that's what he said. I want to kill him. You know, I want to tear him apart.
And he starts the movie by making a selfish choice, and then he ends the movie making a selfless choice. And that's just exactly what should have happened. It's a good Spider-Man story. It's good in that sense.
But what was great about that scene was, like, he was ready to make that selfish choice again.
Yeah.
But, you know, Toby popped in and kind of, as the more mature Spider-Man, as the most experienced Spider-Man, you know, he comes in and reminds him what Spider-Man really is.
Yeah,
and he's not the guy to do that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Which ultimately leads Tom to drop the glider, and you know, obviously that gave, you know, Goblin the opportunity to stab Toby, and that was a scary scene for myself, honestly, because I was like, when that happened, I was just like, Bully!
Yeah, I was like, Bully, no, we just got you back.
Yeah, we lost the Topester. I was this close to, like, losing it. I'm like, you can't bring him back just to kill him off.
Yeah, exactly.
Which was, like, a lot of people's theories was that Toby was going to die at the end of this film.
Yeah, I thought that was too. I thought that was going to happen. And I love how they brought the music back from Mark Webb's Spider-Man movies and Danny Elfman's score from the Raimi movies when they had their good moments. So they were subtle, but they were there, and I appreciate their presence. And I felt like their presence, the most important thing in this movie, aside from being a good Spider-Man movie, Tom Holland.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to bring back these characters, it needs to be for a reason. They need to have some sort of impact, which they did. And I'm just so happy. I'm so happy.
Absolutely.
I was stressing.
Yeah. I was stressing the whole
really
time.
Was.
And honestly, the last two scenes that I really liked, absolutely, that I can remember, because I'm definitely going to have to go back and watch it again, was ultimately, you just see so much growth with Tom Holland that, at the end,
so much character.
At the end, like after the spell is put back on to where everyone forgets Tom, when he goes back into the coffee shop where MJ works, he has this script planned out to make her remember him and to make Ned remember him, because they're both in the coffee shop. He has this whole script planned out, and ultimately decides to put the script in his back pocket and not tell them who he is and the relationships that they had, because he knows that being Spider-Man, you're going to have enemies, and if enemies find out your identity, they know who to target. And so he makes that ultimate sacrifice again, because now he is a Spider-Man. He's not a child anymore.
That's the timeless attribute in every good superhero
absolutely
movie.
So
it needs to be you doing the heroic, you doing what others cannot, you making the harder choice.
Because as much as he wanted to tell them, as much as he wants them back, he knows that it's not the time to do that.
And how relatable, and you're right, but how relatable is that desire of Peter's? Like, his problem in this movie is just wanting to have a girlfriend and have his best friend. Like, it's not some like, I want this crazy, I have all these expectations, I want this crazy materialistic thing. It's just that I just want my relationships with my best friend and my girlfriend. And how perfect of a problem is that for a Spider-Man?
Absolutely. And another reason why I think Tobey was great to have in this film is, Tom has a lot of similar attributes to Tobey, especially when it comes to making that sacrifice. Because if you remember in Spider-Man 2, when he has MJ back in his apartment, Tobey says, I'm always going to be Spider-Man.
Yeah, when
Spider-Man is always going to have enemies. Yeah. He's like, I love you, but we can never be together. And so that's, I think, ultimately what Tom is thinking in his mind right now, which is why he didn't tell them the truth, and he put the note in his back pocket, because he knows that Spider-Man is always going to have enemies. And, look how easily they found out his true identity and fucked up not just his life, but the people he loved,
that was
and that were closest to him.
Him getting outed as Spider-Man, how that affected Ned and MJ.
Absolutely.
That was so important to their friendship and their relationship.
Which ultimately is what brought them even closer.
And think about it, hit them being friends with Peter ultimately got them rejected from MIT. But they were still there for him when Aunt May died. They were still by his side fighting.
Yeah, they said, listen, we're not going
They were by
anywhere.
his side, and that's perfect. It's what friendship is. And it just made me.
It was like it was a complete moment.
Yeah, and wholesome.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
And the last thing I want to talk about is obviously the new suit and him coming to terms with being on his own and not having
really has
anyone.
No one now.
He has no one. He has to adjust to this new life. He's on his own. Like, from when you see him and he's moving into his new apartment and he has all these boxes, you can see he didn't finish high school. He has his a GED book in his boxes, and so he has to get adjusted to this new life living on his own. He has to study on his own. He has no one to turn to. Mm-hmm. He's got his police scanner, and he's got Spider-Man. That's what he's got.
Yeah.
And so what I really liked from that scene is you see the beginning of Peter Parker as an adult and learning to be Spider-Man without anyone there. Because ultimately, that's what Spider-Man did. He didn't have anyone. No one knew his identity.
Yeah.
He has no one. And so, you see him, this is the origin to that adult life. And he doesn't have the Stark technology. He doesn't have any of these upgraded suits, this money. He doesn't have Happy, who's in charge of Stark Industries, running that with Pepper Potts.
Yeah,
it's just him now. So he has to make his own suit. And the thing that I loved most from that was, like we talked about before, the incorporation of the other two Spider-Man's suits into his suit.
Be his permanent suit from now on.
His permanent suit from now on. And it's not the Stark Spider. It's his own Spider.
Yeah.
It's got the, like I said, it's got the Garfield blue, and it's got the Tobey red. And that was a great tribute to them, because ultimately they saved him.
Yeah, they did.
They saved him.
They were integral
physically,
Into his
emotionally,
arc,
spiritually, they saved Tom's
yes,
Spider-Man.
I agree with everything you just said. I was really impressed with this movie. I was really happy that I'm happy it exists. I'm happy it didn't ruin anything for me. I'm glad the multiverse wasn't so in your face. It wasn't like so unbelievable. It was just good. Like, I don't know. I mean, and I like how Peter, every movie in this home trilogy, he made like a really, at the end of the movie, he made, even though he makes the best decision he's made yet, the most selfless decision he's made yet, he made in this film. In Homecoming, he was like, no, I don't want to be an Avenger. I'll just be a little guy. I'll be the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. And in Far From Home, he took the glasses back and stopped Mysterio, and like, ultimately his identity got revealed. But in this movie, you know what I mean? His journey up until this point is really evident now, I feel like, with this movie. I think it was great.
Yeah, I think it's as close to perfect as it can get.
Yeah.
I think in my final thoughts here, ultimately, I actually adored this film.
Yeah, me too.
And it's definitely one that I want to see again. And just to nitpick a little more and see what I missed the first time, maybe see if I can pick up on any clues as to what the direction that they're going to go in this next trilogy. But ultimately, it was a solid film, and for all the listeners out there, we hope that you enjoyed the film too.
Yeah.
And like we said, this
see it.
Yeah, definitely
It's
go.
really
If you haven't seen it, definitely go out to see it. But if you haven't seen it and you listen to this, we tried to warn you in the beginning that we were going to drop some spoilers. But
we're sorry that we couldn't make a spoiler-free podcast. But the thing is, it's just like I said in the beginning. It's just there's all the things worth talking about in this film had to do with spoilers. It's just the way it is.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, this would have just been like the cinematography was great, the writing was very good. Like you know what I mean? It would have just wouldn't have been the same.
Absolutely. So I think I want to end this video by saying, with great power comes great responsibility. Definitely go out and see it. Thanks for listening. Give us a like, comment, subscribe.
So thank you all for listening. We appreciate it. Cinema 914.
Cinema 914. Shooter.
Shooter McGavin.
Bully!
Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like what you heard and you liked Nick's input, then go check out our other channel, Cinema 914. It's a podcast that we're doing. We're going to cover a lot of new material as well as a lot of older material. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, a comment, subscribe to the channel. I'd be more than appreciative if you did. Have a great day, and I will see you all next week. Take care, everybody. Stay safe.